afternoon. Let me try that again. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. And Happy New Year. I have very good reason to believe that 2013 is going to be a great year, and what a great way to start at an event like this. On behalf of the Advisory Council on Climate, Culture, and Inclusion, I want to warmly welcome you to a special occasion that brings together the campus community. What Matters to Me and Why series. My name is Doug Haynes, and I'm a member of the Department of History. But I'm here today as the organizing committee chair of this series. Today is a third installment of the What Matters to Me and Why series that was launched last fall. The purpose of the series is to build and strengthen bonds between members of the campus community, including students, staff, and faculty, and to foster understanding about how we in our individual ways embrace UCI values. And these values, which are familiar to most of you, include respect, intellectual curiosity, integrity, commitment, empathy, appreciation, and fun. I like the last one a lot. Before I turn the program over to my colleague and committee member, Jonathan Fang, I just want to remind you of four things. Number one, speak up during the question and answer session after the talk. We want to ensure that your voices will be recorded. Number two, complete the audience survey, which will be available to you at the end of the event. And please note that there's an opportunity for you to volunteer by simply detaching the volunteer form from the survey. Third, discard your lunch boxes. We want to be good neighbors. And remember that our next event is scheduled for Wednesday, February 13th, with Dr. Karen Lane of the Child Cancer Center and the UCI Medical School. Now I'd like to turn it over to Jonathan.
Well, it's my great pleasure today to be able to introduce our speaker, who's Professor Hung Pan. Hung wears many hats on campus. He is a professor in the Department of Molecular Biology and Biochemistry in the School of Biological Sciences. He is also the director of the Cancer Research Institute, and he is also the co-director of the Child Family Comprehensive Cancer Center. As we no doubt will hear more about, he studies the molecular biology of retroviruses, which are, of course, of critical importance given their role in causing cancer and AIDS. And his research has been recognized in many, many ways, including the Distinguished Research Career Award from Ohio State University in 2002, fellowship in many learned societies, including the American Academy of Microbiology, and also the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And he's also served on many advisory and editorial boards for top journals, the Journal of Virology, and numerous important scientific advisory committees at the national and international level. The thing I'll maybe concentrate on is his role more locally. He's been a leader of the faculty at UC Irvine for many years. He has chaired, for example, both of the elected committees of the Academic Senate. One of these is called the Committee on Committees, which the name may give you an impression this is the ultimate pinnacle of the Bureau of Bureaucratic Medicare. But in fact, its role is extremely important. It basically populates, selects members for all of the committees that the Faculty Senate has. And so it plays an essential role in the famed shared governance of the University of California. The other committee is CAP, the Council on Academic Personnel, which provides the final review of some 700 faculty cases every single year, including all professor appointments, all promotions to tenure, all essentially academic personnel actions. And as you might expect, sharing these kind of groups, filled with faculty members of all stripes is no easy task. And I can say from having served on these committees under Hung while he was chair, that when the sparks start flying, he is the perfect person to have sitting in the big chair at the end of the table as a level-headed and wise leader in these sort of instances. For this and his many other contributions to this campus, he received the 2008 Daniel G. Aldrich Jr. Award. For those of you who don't know, that is the award given each year to one faculty member for distinguished university service. So please welcome Professor Hung.
Thank you, Jonathan. Is it better if I use the microphone or if I can stand over there? What do you think? Microphone? Okay, all right. Thank you very much. This is actually an adventure for me as well, because this is stretching well beyond what I normally do. So we'll go along this venture together. Okay, so let me tell you first a little bit about my background. I was born in Beijing, China, but my family immigrated here to the United States in 1949. Actually, we left China 2 weeks before Chiang Kai-shek left China. Now, my father, we moved right to West Lafayette, Indiana. And some of you may recognize West Lafayette, Indiana is the home of Purdue University. And my dad joined the faculty of the physics department at Purdue. And so in many ways, I'm what you would call a faculty brat. And in fact, my childhood, I grew up in a place that is very similar to University Hills. It was a housing development developed by Purdue for faculty and staff, but on a much smaller scale than University Hills. Now, college, for college, I went to Purdue. I lived at home and went to Purdue. Now, the reason for that was my father, who was a very practical person, said, it doesn't really matter what undergraduate school you go to, as long as if you do well, you can get into any graduate school that you want to. So there was a bit of a message there that we were going to graduate school. And indeed, so I went to Purdue. Actually, I majored in physics, but then really biology was my interest. I was really drawn to that. And so from after having completed my undergraduate work, I went to MIT, where I was a graduate student. At MIT, I worked in a laboratory of a professor who was, and really worked on molecular biology of mammalian cells, and this was back in the 1970s, late 60s, actually in early 70s, when that was rather a new field, and I was very fortunate to learn from a real pioneer in that field, to work in that. While I was a graduate student and getting toward the end of my degree, another professor in the department, Dr. David Baltimore, made a very important discovery, a very exciting discovery. What he discovered was an enzyme in what at that point were called RNA tumor viruses, and that enzyme was the enzyme reverse transcriptase. And those of you who know something about biology will recognize reverse transcriptase as kind of the hallmark enzyme of retroviruses. And indeed, Dr. Baltimore, David, received the Nobel Prize for that discovery some number of years later. So after he made that discovery, I asked if I could be a postdoc in his lab, and he said he accepted me into his lab as a postdoc, and I postdoced in his lab, and I've really worked on retroviruses ever since, as Jonathan has mentioned. Okay, now retroviruses, let me just say something about retroviruses as a research field. I feel really the retroviruses have had really very important contributions to a number of areas in biomedical sciences over the past 30 or 40 years, really since the discovery of reverse transcriptase. And as a researcher in this field, it's been really a pleasure and a privilege to be working on a research system which has many important implications. As an example, in the area of cancer, study of retroviruses led to what we call the discovery of oncogenes. And oncogenes are cell genes that in fact get abnormal in cancer, and it was really through the study of retroviruses that we came to this understanding. That was really our first understanding of a genetic change that takes place in cancer cells. Another very important basic biochemical process in a cell is messenger RNA splicing. Retroviruses also played a role in the discovery and understanding of mRNA splicing. Another important area is recombinant DNA technology, gene cloning, and so forth. And again, the reverse transcriptase enzyme of retroviruses is very important in that process. Another area is gene therapy, that is modifying the genetic makeup of cells, really with the goal of, for instance, correcting disease defects, and retroviruses have been a major platform for that as well. And then finally, as Jonathan mentioned, the HIV, the cause of acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, is in fact a retrovirus. So these have all been really important things. Now, in terms of, after I finished my PhD, my first research job, or independent research job, was at the Salk Institute in San Diego. This is just a pure research institute, and actually, in comparison to what researchers now need to do to get independent jobs, at that point it was another era, and I kind of just fell into that job. Okay, it was Dr. Baltimore took a number of people to the Salk Institute on one summer, and we spent the summer there, and at the end of the summer the Salk offered two of us jobs, and so that was it. I took that job, and I started at the Salk and started my independent program on retroviruses there, and was there for 8 years before now coming up to UCI. And I moved to UCI in 1981. So I've been at UCI a little over 30 years now. It's during that whole time, I've worked on retroviruses, different retroviruses, a retrovirus of mice called mouse leukemia virus, a retrovirus of sheep called Yaxikta sheep retrovirus, retroviruses of monkeys and of humans. So it's been really a lot of fun and really rewarding work. What I want to do now is really talking about, so that's the easy part, telling you about me. I really want to talk about now really more about, kind of what matters to me and why. And I first want to talk about feeling different. Okay, now as I think we all grow up, or many of us when we grow up, as we grow up, we feel we're different in one way or another. And sometimes those differences are differences that may be very apparent. Other different times the differences may be internalized. But part of growing up is really confronting and dealing with those differences, and ultimately accepting differences and hopefully embracing them. Okay, that's a very important part of growing up. Now, in that context, I consider myself, and certainly as I was growing up, I considered myself a triple minority. Okay, so I want to tell you a little bit about the three kinds of differences that kind of weighed on my mind as I was growing up. The first one was the obvious one. Okay, I'm Chinese. Growing up at that point in West Lafayette, Indiana, in the 1950s, it's very different than Southern California, I'll tell you that. Okay, we were really one of a handful of families in West Lafayette, or the greater Lafayette area, that were from China. The population was much more homogeneous at that time. It was really kind of typical white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, WASP. That was the society at that point. Now, in fact, we were so small in number that we did not face discrimination. We were just oddities, I would say, more than anything else. Okay, but nevertheless, the cultural norm growing up was white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And in fact, if you go back and you look at like Leave It to Beaver or Father Knows Best, that was in fact very much what growing up in West Lafayette was like. And that those were the pressures, and you know, the pressures as you're growing up in those teen years to conform and so forth. That was what the pressure was to conform to. On the other hand, my parents did instill in us Asian values. We didn't speak Chinese at home, and that's another story. But in fact, the Asian values were very much instilled in us, and that is the importance of education, the importance of working to your potential, a value of music and the arts, and so forth. So, in fact, that's my first minority part. The second part is religion. Okay, and in terms of religion, I was not raised in any religion. And in fact, not being raised in a religion, I in fact never felt the urge or the need to believe in a God. Okay, so that is just, and in fact, if you look around the world, there'll be quite a number of people that are like that. So I would say right now, as far as religion, I'm someplace between an agnostic and an atheist. Okay, now, again, growing up in West Lafayette, Indiana in the 1950s, not believing in God was definitely not normal. And I'll give you one example, which I remember quite vividly to this day, and that was when I was a sophomore in my English class. So it was in an English class, and one of the things that we would occasionally do, there would be an assignment to write a paper in class, and those we called themes at that time. And there were 3 or 4 topics that the teacher had written on the board saying, these are the topics that you can write your theme in class today on. And one of the topics was, why I believe in God. Okay, imagine a teacher now in a public school assigning something like this. So I asked the class, in the middle of class, you know, at the beginning of class, I said, well, can I write about why I do not believe in God? And she said, no. And then I said to her, you know, just not confrontationally, but maybe a little bit, I said, gee, that's really interesting. That's the first time I've ever been told that I can only write on one side of a topic. This really made her upset, not so much at me, but I think as much also really torn about the fact because I hadn't pointed out something to her. The net result was we spent the entire class, while my classmates were all trying to write their themes, discussing this point openly in class. So that was an example of confronting this issue. And in fact, as time went on, some of my most heated, almost violent arguments that I've had with friends have been with friends who are both empirical scientists and devoutly religious. Because in arguing with them, it's in fact not very hard to pin them into contradictions, because the one side they have their beliefs, and the other side they have the empirical kind of scientific approaches that they are also learning in. And ultimately, what I learned from that was that, in fact, religion is based on belief and faith. Okay, and you cannot argue in a rational sense faith. Okay, it's really there's faith-based issues, and there are the kind of scientific, real-world kind of issues that we deal with all the time. And in fact, Dr. Ayala in the first lecture in this series touched on that very much as well. But at the same time, that's not to say that I did not absorb in my upbringing Judeo-Christian values, okay, because in fact I did. And in fact, the other point is that I am now a member of University Synagogue because my husband is Jewish, okay, and now that leads to the third part of being a minority, okay. I am a gay person, okay. I knew I was gay probably beginning in early adolescence, which is the typical case, and as with many gay teenagers growing up, I struggled with that, hoping that I was not gay, and I struggled with it a lot. And I struggled with it at one level or another all the way through until I came out. Now, that took a long time for me. It was actually while I eventually came out when I was in already at the Salk Institute doing research. Okay, then the question is, well, what was the response of my friends, family, and so forth to coming out? Well, for my friends at the Salk Institute, it was not an issue. It was, in fact, I knew them well by that time, and telling them that I was gay was something that was just another, aspect of myself. And the same was true for my brother and sisters. They were very, congratulations, you came out kind of response. My parents, it was a little harder for them, and it took some time, but eventually they did come around. Now, in San Diego, when I was there, when I came out, I began to, meet people, other gay people, join social organizations and so forth, and I met my partner, Michael Feldman. At that point, we've actually been together now for 32 years. Okay, so in fact, 4 years ago, during the time when we got married here in California. So I think, as many of you know, the California State Supreme Court made a ruling that gay marriage was legal, and then until Proposition 8 was passed in the fall election, same-sex marriage was legal. And so we got married during that time. We were married by the rabbi at University Synagogue, in fact. For those of you who might wonder, in fact, yes, even though we had been together for 28 years at the time we got married, getting married was in fact an important and rewarding experience. Okay, it deepened our relationship. And so for those who might say, well, if you can have domestic partnership is not the same as marriage, with all of the both external and internal validations that go along with marriage. It is really, it has deepened our relationship. And I do hope that the pending U.S. Supreme Court decision case there's a couple of cases in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. I do hope that it will be possible for other people in California to get married in the near future. Okay, now the other thing I want to just mention is when I was recruited here to UCI in 1981, there was a bit of a question in my mind, how open do I want to be about being gay? Because before, when I had come out of the Salk Institute, people knew me already. But here I was coming into a new environment, and now the question is, what is their response going to be to me, and is the fact that I'm gay going to influence how they relate to me? But I thought, I've done all of this hard work mentally to get to the point where I could come out. And of course, I have Michael at this point. And so we really decided that when we came here, we would be open about the fact that we were a couple. And I'm delighted to say that it really worked out well. The department has always been very supportive. And in fact, the university has been very supportive too. And again, as I was saying, 30 years ago, that was not necessarily the case. Read about the Briggs Initiative if you're interested in that, which was in 1978. Okay, so what matters to me? First of all, friends and family. Okay, my husband Michael. Okay, we have similar interests, we have similar outlooks in life, and we just really enjoy each other. We rely on each other for support too, so really important. My family, my brother and sisters, we're far flung. We live in different parts of the U.S., but we get together a couple of times a year, and when we do, that common background that we had in growing up really it melts the years away, and it's like you're a teenager again. And I enjoy very much seeing my nieces and nephews who have been raised by my brother and sisters really moving forward and progressing, and I'm very proud of them. The other friends are really important too, and friends Many friends here at UCI have just really made life really a pleasure. Okay, second important thing is academic life. In academic life, first of all, the science. And besides the actual science, I think the really the thing that I find rewarding, and I think many of my colleagues find rewarding, is that in science, you're not doing the same thing every day, but there's new things happening all the time. Okay, and in fact, science is a collaborative enterprise. Whether you yourself are collaborating on your project with someone else, also, you are collaborating with the entire community of your research area, because someone else in another part of the world may make a discovery that now allows you to interpret your particular problem and your results that you haven't been able to interpret. And so it's that community enterprise that is really a nice thing about doing science. And the other part of academia is teaching. Okay, so there's teaching of two sorts. In my case, a very important and an important part to me of teaching is research mentorship. That is, starting with 199 students, graduate students, postdocs, really teaching them how to do science. And in fact, when my laboratory does research, it is really the manipulations are in the hands of the graduate students, the postdocs, the undergraduate students. And it's really that shared experience of discovery that is really enjoyable. And the fact that you teach as you're doing these experiments, it's really like apprenticeship in many ways, in that you're teaching these people to think the way you think about doing science. That's really very rewarding, particularly as you see people that leave your lab and they go to other places, and they're kind of carrying your same outlooks on how to do science. The other kind of teaching is classroom teaching. I'm a kind of traditional classroom teacher in which I get up and I lecture and so forth. I don't use clickers and so forth, things like that. And really, some of the most inspiring experiences I had as a student myself was hearing a expert really synthesize a particular field and present it to us in a way that you couldn't get by reading out of a textbook. And I try to do that in the courses that I teach, and sometimes it works, okay, and sometimes, occasionally I'll have someone who tells me, yes, I remember your course, and I thought it was a really cool course, and I remember the material. I was recently on a search committee for a senior administrator here at UCI, and one of the candidates that came through happened to be a UCI alumnus. He was a medical doctor, and he said, I don't know if you remember or not, but I took your molecular biology of cancer course, which I still teach to this day, the year I was graduating, which was the first year I taught it. He said, that course is one of the reasons I went into oncology. So that's the kind of rewarding part of teaching that if you occasionally you can get a good hit like that, and you're really happy about that. Okay, now on a more okay, great. On a more, I'm getting there. on a more general and societal level, what's important, and these are things that actually Doug mentioned in the reason for this this program. Number one is diversity. Okay, I think diversity in communities is really, really important. I think we are very fortunate here at UCI to be a diverse community, because the diversity enriches the community as a whole, and also it enriches each of us because we come into contact with people who are different. At the same time, equally important in diversity is tolerance and understanding. Okay, because and one of the important things about this is being able to appreciate that people are different, and also when they are different, even if you don't agree with them completely, is to appreciate and value the positive parts of that person as well. So, I think those are kinds of things that you can get out of a diverse community. Now, communities, okay, I think are also really important, as was really mentioned here. And really, I think communities, it's important to think about communities as we all are members of communities of different sorts, but it's not that we should just take from the community, but we have to contribute as well. And I think that's something that is really important. UCI is definitely a community, and I think students who are here, I hope as you graduate and you leave, you still consider yourself part of the UCI community, because you are. Staff and faculty, besides this is the place where you get your paycheck, it's really important to contribute to making UCI a real community. And the other thing is, if you can afford it at whatever level, dollars. Okay, you know how stressed UC and UCI is in terms of finances, and we can help, and I'd make that pitch to those of you who are in a position to. Finally, what I really want to kind of sum this up by saying is that I consider myself actually quite fortunate, and in that I appreciate a number of things. First of all, I appreciate having been raised by loving and stable parents, okay, who instilled in me the cultural and values that I carry. I appreciate having been able to do research in a time when it was really exciting to do biomedical research in the area that I'm working on. So that was really, that's great. I appreciate very much living here in the U.S., okay, because here in the U.S. we do have, the U.S. there's democracy, there's freedom, and there's tolerance. Regardless of what we argue about, those are all the case. And certainly in the U.S. more so than many places in the world. And I kind of think about what it would have been like if we hadn't immigrated and I had been raised in mainland China. The life experience would have been quite different. And finally, I appreciate having time-wise living here in the United States in a time where I've been able to develop my potential as a triple minority. Okay, and I think to me it's very important that society continues to support the ability of people with differences like this, like myself, and in the future. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for a wonderful talk. Now, an essential part of this whole speaker series is the chance to ask questions and open discussion. We have lots of time for that, so please raise your hand, and I think Hung will point you out. And again, let me remind you to please speak up so that the videotape can pick you up.
Yes?
What made you decide to go to UC Irvine?
So what made me decide to go to UC Irvine? At the time that I was looking for positions, I had, it's really a combination of two things. The most important thing in looking at places to go was what are the nature of your potential colleagues. And I found the colleagues, the faculty in my department, molecular biology and biochemistry, to be very engaging, interactive, interested faculty who were doing interesting science. And that was the major reason. The minor reason was I had gotten used to living in Southern California, quite frankly. Yes?
Oh, you mentioned, you described yourself as having triple minority status. One of my colleagues in our department, Diego Vigil, talks about multiple marginality. I think back to when Shirley Chisholm was in Congress, and she surprised people once when she said she felt she'd been more discriminated against as a woman than as a black person. Of the three types of minority status that you have had, which do you think has been met with more discrimination and why?
So that's an interesting question. Of my three minorities, which one has been the one that I've felt the most discrimination against? First of all, I would say that I think probably, let me first say that I actually don't personally have perceived as myself having experienced that much discrimination. And that could be because it happens behind my back and I don't know it, or it could be because I'm oblivious, or because it doesn't happen. but all of those things said, I think probably the discrimination that I think about most is being gay. And the reasons for that are that is still an issue, okay? And society is still struggling with that issue. Religion, by and large, if I'm not a flag-waving non-believer, okay, and so that largely hasn't been so much of an issue, except in these rather pointed cases where it gets focused. And being Asian, certainly here in Southern California, I'm not really a minority anymore. So. Yes.
I realize this is a pretty personal question, but it's relevant. This is my younger brother is gay and has not come out to our Asian parents. What was that like for you? And if you could have done that differently, would you have?
The coming out experience, I mean, what was it like? Well, as I said, I struggled with coming out for many years. Okay, so between the time it was a process of, as a young teenager, realizing that I was attracted to the same sex, okay, and that kind of crystallizing over probably through high school and into college, and then really there was this period of saying, well, maybe I can change myself to being straight, but in fact that I could never convince myself of that, and I really while I was starting my career in San Diego, actually I just devoted most of my attention and energy to getting my lab going, but eventually when I came out, it was, as I said, it was a situation where my immediate friends, who were largely Salk Institute faculty and staff, were very supportive, and my brother and sisters were very supportive. It was my parents it was toughest with. My father had no clue until I told him. My mom kind of expected, kind of what it would be frequently the case, and it was I think they had. Certainly, my mother expressed it. She said, I wish you'd change. But in fact, then she, in a few months, said, I realize you're not going to. So, she said, okay, that's what, she accepted me. I wouldn't say our relationship was perhaps as close as the relationship of my brother and sisters, but that, again, could also be because of the fact that we don't have kids. And a lot of the reinforcement of people as they get older with their children is through through their grandchildren. Yes.
So I guess this is kind of a personal question too, but I'm also kind of, I guess, in between atheist and agnostic, and my parents are religious, and they often tell me, you should believe in something, and you should believe in God, and because He'll give you strength. And I suppose my question is, where do you find the strength if you're not believing in God? I guess, what do you believe in?
Okay, so that's a very good question. I mean, so I think, first of all, let me say that I think it would be, if you do not believe in God, to make yourself believe in God is a very difficult prospect. And I don't think I could do that. But at the same time, as I said, my frame of reference is what I know here, and I can process and so forth. If there is a God and I just haven't been aware of it, I'm willing. That's okay too. Okay. In terms of the strength of how to go without a God, I think part of what I believe is in fact what is called humanism. Okay, that is, humans in fact are very much responsible for the societies that they build, and we have to, as humans, really take care of those societies. And as opposed to saying, and that is kind of the humanistic, the basic humanistic philosophy, and as opposed to saying a deity is going to lay these laws down. I think, so for me, that's really kind of my context. Yeah.
What is your advice for being in a successful relationship where you have like two different religious viewpoints?
Okay, so being in a relationship where you have two different religious viewpoints. I think, again, I think it's two things. You have to, number one is respect of the different viewpoints, and to understand that if someone believes something, and it is, it's an issue of faith, you can't, you just accept that they believe that, okay? And then it's appreciating the fact that even if you don't share a particular viewpoint, for instance in religion, you can still have many other areas that you do share together. Yes?
So, as a professor and also as a leading researcher in cancer, I can see how you are contributing to the community. But sometimes students we're taking up all different types of careers that are not related to in any way engaging with the community, and we feel a huge void in that section of our lives.
So you're saying that as a student, you feel that you're not engaged in the community as much as you would like to be. Well, I think there is a reality that is, there's 24 hours in a day, and as a student you have to study, things like that. But on the other hand, being a member of a community doesn't necessarily take hours and hours at a given time. Okay, first, I think the most important thing is to think of yourself as part of the community, and to think of yourself as participating in the community. And then what you can do is really going to be reflected in how much time, energy, and so forth you can put into it. Yeah.
You mentioned it very briefly in your intro. Why didn't your parents speak Chinese at home?
Okay, why didn't my parents speak Chinese at home? The reason was, when my father was hired at Purdue University, he was initially hired as a visiting professor. He had actually, so the long version of the story is my father was actually, during the war, was a faculty member of Tsinghua University, which is a university in China, but in fact, they had relocated from Beijing down to Kunming, which is in Yunnan province, because they were avoiding the Japanese occupation. After the war, my father did a sabbatical, and he went to MIT for his sabbatical. And at MIT, he met the chairman of the physics department at Purdue, who said, "Why don't you come and do a visiting professorship for a year?" By that time, so he said, "Okay." And we were actually still in China when he was doing his sabbatical. So we came for a year, and my parents thought, they're here for a year, let them speak English, they'll learn a language skill, and then when we go back to China, they'll know two languages. But when it turned permanent, if you're a Chinese person living in West Lafayette, Indiana, trying to get us to start speaking Chinese didn't happen.
What interests you most about research? What do you like most about research?
What do I like about research? I think what I like about research is, first of all, for me, research, doing research is something that you have to find something that sparks your imagination and interest. When I was going through graduate school, virology just sparked my interest. That is, even though I wasn't working in a virology lab, I could remember trivia about virology, and that just told me that that's something that the virology is an area that I'm interested in. And so then the opportunity to work on retroviruses came along, and that's how I got into retroviruses. What's really exciting about research is if you're interested in a problem, is being able to peel back those layers, okay, and get more understanding about a particular topic. Typically, it's not that you go from point A to point Z, but you really make these small little incremental steps that you do, and it's during that whole time, it's doing experiments in your own laboratory, and then hearing what other people are doing elsewhere, and being able to put things together. That's what's really fun and exciting. Yes.
And if you had studied in the field that you're in now, what do you think you would have studied in?
What would I have done if I weren't in? That's a very good question. I don't know. Okay. I don't have an answer for that. That's really good. Yeah.
Let's say you didn't switch to biology, stayed in physics.
Oh, if I had stayed in physics, I would have been in big trouble. I mean, and actually, why I majored in physics was so I have an older brother. My older brother, in many ways, I was following his footsteps. In some ways, my older brother also. My father was, you might say now what we would call a dragon father, in the sense that he had very strong opinions about what we should be doing in terms of our academic background and so forth. And my brother actually wanted to be a social scientist, and my father said, this doesn't make sense. He said, he said, social science is too hard because there's no rights and wrongs. He said, take something easy like physics, where you know if you're right or you're wrong. And so my brother majored in physics, but as an escape, he worked as he was an undergraduate in a biology laboratory. And when it came time to applying for graduate school, MIT said, you've got the background that we like. And that's why I did the same thing. Yeah.
So, often when you're going towards, a certain goal, there will be changes that you'll end up doing something totally different anyway. Were there any, unexpected turns in your career path, or, to where you are now? Did you expect being in the spot that you are now, or did you expect something different?
So good question. Is my career where I thought it was going to go? Well, I guess in some ways it is where I thought it was going to go, in that the academic life and being a professor suits me just fine. Okay, and one of the things, for better or worse, about our system is if you achieve some level, you get what's called tenure, and you can continue to do that. And so, in that sense, my career has been pretty much along the same lines. I've not branched off into different areas, or, for instance, some people will take a job in industry or something like that. I haven't gone that direction. Yeah.
I was wondering if you've ever been back to China, and also
Yes.
what's probably the most interesting place you've traveled to?
Well, so have I been back to China? Yes, I have. In 1984, I established a collaboration with a laboratory in Shanghai, and at the Shanghai Medical University, and I went back to China every 3 or 4 years, and actually with a very good, became a close friend and colleague. I supervised a number of her master's students there. So most interesting places of travel, lots of places in China have, over the years, what I would do is they would send me to different places for tourism and so forth. So I've visited some very interesting places. I would say probably the areas in China that I've visited have been most interesting for me. And India also. I've been to India 3 times, and that was really cool too.
Maybe we can take one more question. Well, there's so many, sorry.
Since you don't know how to speak Chinese, or unless you learn sometime in your point, or at some point, do you ever feel disconnected with your culture?
Okay, that's in some ways, yes, because do I feel disconnected from my culture? in some ways, one of the things about growing up in this kind of where beaver cleaver was the norm and being Asian, there was some, I would say, discomfort with being Chinese in that level. But actually, after I went back to China, that kind of went away. So in fact, the first language I spoke was Chinese. Okay, so I can understand Chinese inflections and so forth. It's just that I have zero vocabulary. And yeah.
That was pretty quick, so maybe we take these last two, if we can get them in. Please go ahead.
Dr. Fan, you mentioned earlier that part of your Asian cultural background was music and the arts. Could you elaborate on that?
Okay, one of my major avocations that I do, my right brain activity, is I like to play violin and viola. I play chamber music, and I play it just for fun with friends. I do it a couple of nights a week, and we just get together and play the chamber music literature.
This also has to do with, I guess, Chinese culture, because I grew up in a very Chinese family, so there's always been the idea where it's kind of practicality over yourself, or I guess like the community over yourself, what your family wants for you, you know, what other people want, basically. So I guess, how have you found a way to balance out what's practical and what you want to do, what you love to do?
Yeah, balancing what people tell you you should do with what you want to do. I think it's something that you just, I personally just had to, you know, work with and find a balance where I was enjoying things that I was doing, at the same time perhaps fulfilling expectations. Like, for instance, biology is one where, in fact, I really enjoy doing biology, where my father was a physicist, and, you know, that was his idea of what was really cool.
Okay, so given the time, let me just remind you two things. You do have these questionnaires in hand. Please do hand them in on your way out. And second, the next talk will be next month. I think it's the 13th of February. Karen Lane from the School of Medicine. So let's thank Hung Fan again.